Today, we're going to talk about aerial lift safety. You may know this type of equipment by commonly used names such as cherry pickers or snorkel lifts. It is any telescoping or articulating device mounted on a vehicle used to elevate or position people. It includes a platform, such as a bucket or basket, to carry personnel. Various types of equipment include aerial lifts, and they are often mounted on trucks. Aerial lifts are used in various industries, such as utilities, construction, and tree service. Because aerial lifts can be hazardous, they are regulated by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA. If you work in aerial lifts or near them on the ground, you need to understand the hazards, the basic regulatory requirements, and the safety work practices that must be followed to prevent accidents and injuries. The main objective of this session is to review aerial lift safety requirements. By the time the session is over, you should be able to identify aerial lift hazards, safely operate equipment, inspect equipment, and take necessary precautions when working in or near an aerial lift to prevent accidents and injuries.
We'll go into detail about hazards and precautions in upcoming slides during the session, but here's a quick preview. One of the most common hazards of working in aerial lifts is falling out of the platform or bucket. Make sure you use personal fall arrest or travel restraint systems and that guardrails are maintained in good working order. Another common hazard is tipping over the vehicle carrying the lift. Tip-overs can occur if the lift is overloaded or if the vehicle is not properly stabilized before use. You need to know about load limits and how to maintain stability of the vehicle to prevent tip-overs. Overhead power lines are another very dangerous hazard for workers in aerial lifts. Contact with power lines could result in electrocution. Unless you are trained to work on high-voltage electrical equipment, always stay well clear of power lines. And then there's the hazard of falling objects for those working on the ground near aerial lifts. Depending on the work being performed by the employee in the lift, tools, materials, tree branches, or other heavy objects could fall on workers on the ground and cause injuries, particularly head injuries, which is why workers on the ground should always wear head protection. Other hazards include coming in contact with ceilings and other overhead objects, being caught between the platform and other objects, or being struck by objects due to structural failure or collapse. Before using any type of aerial lift, it's very important to become familiar with the equipment. Take the time to review the information on accident prevention signs that are required to be posted on the equipment. Look for warnings, cautions, and restrictions. Following these instructions will help you operate the equipment safely. Manufacturer's information, such as the name, address, and phone number of the manufacturer and the equipment model, can help you obtain more information about safe operation, maintenance, or repair of the equipment. Remember, you should also become familiar with the operating and maintenance manual before actually using any equipment with an aerial lift. Take the time to read the manual carefully and get to know the equipment completely. It's time well spent. You should also know the rated workload of the lift. This information will be posted right on the equipment itself. Knowing the rated workload will help prevent tip-overs. Some aerial lifts, for example, are only designed to hold the weight of 1 or 2 workers. They may not have the additional capacity to take on a load of materials, tools, and so on when they are fully extended. The maximum platform height will also be posted on the equipment. Equipment can have different maximum heights depending on whether outrigger devices or stabilizers are used. Always check for maximum height. Even if you've used other equipment, the equipment you're using now could be different. Never exceed platform heights. Aerial lifts may also be marked with a statement that indicates whether the work platform is electrically insulated, and if so, the level of protection the insulation provides. You should be careful to keep aerial lifts away from power lines anyway, but be extra careful if the platform is not insulated. Always be sure to test operate the aerial lift. Be sure you can operate it without jerky motions, which may cause accidents. Finally, be sure the aerial lift has drainage holes so rainwater does not accumulate. Be sure the drainage holes are not blocked. Think about the equipment you use. Are you familiar with all the safety issues covered in this and the previous slide?
OSHA requires equipment with aerial lifts to be designed and constructed according to certain standards. The primary goal is to protect the worker in the lift by providing fail-safe mechanisms that will prevent a free-fall descent of the work platform. Electrical equipment must meet specific standards, especially if the elevation of the platform is accomplished by an electromechanical assembly. Hydraulic and pneumatic components must meet bursting safety factor standards to prevent failure of hoses or other equipment. Welds of all components must meet specific standards, especially welds on booms and work platforms. Finally, cables that are used in the hoist system must also meet certain requirements and have a broken cable safety device that prevents free fall. Think about the design features on the equipment you use and how these features help protect you from accidents and injuries. Load capacity is another important design issue. The rated workload capacity must be clearly displayed on the work platform. Most aerial lifts have a single capacity listed because the equipment is fairly simple. However, some of the more complex aerial lift devices have multiple configurations, each requiring a different workload rating. Be sure to review the workload for the various configurations and never exceed the load capacity indicated. Equipment with outriggers or stabilizers will have a different rating depending on whether the outriggers are extended. Obviously, the workload will be higher if the stabilizers are extended. Some equipment permits the use of different sizes of work platforms, so the workload must be listed for each type of work platform. Some equipment might have different rated workloads that depend on the angle of the boom. If the boom is elevated straight up, the equipment can handle more weight. If the boom is at a low angle, the equipment is more likely to tip over, so the rated capacity is less. If this is the case, the equipment must have a boom angle indicator located where the operator in the lift can monitor the angle. The rated workload may also depend on whether the boom is extended or retracted. When the boom is extended, the workload is reduced.
Many aerial lifts are designed with interlock devices that help prevent an operator from accidentally exceeding the stability requirements of the equipment and tipping over. A common interlock device is the driving interlock, which prevents the unit from moving or being driven unless the platform height or platform configuration is adjusted to meet stability requirements. In other words, the platform will need to be lowered before the equipment can be moved. Outrigger interlocks prevent the lift from being raised above the height at which an outrigger, stabilizer, or extendable axle is required to maintain stability. Outrigger interlocks also prevent the stabilizer or outrigger from being retracted while the platform is above specified heights. Tilt interlocks prevent aerial lifts from being raised when the base of the unit is not on level ground and exceeds a certain angle, such as 5 degrees. Are you familiar with the interlock devices on the equipment you use? Maintenance of equipment is another critical safety issue. Equipment with aerial lifts must be inspected before each work shift. Equipment must be maintained and repaired according to the manufacturer's instructions. Any equipment found not to be in safe operating condition, either during an inspection or during operation, must be immediately removed from service until repairs are made. This includes leaking hydraulics, frayed or cut hydraulic lines, and frayed wires. All repairs to equipment must be made by qualified maintenance personnel with the necessary training and experience to perform the work. Are you familiar with maintenance requirements for the aerial lifts you use? Even if you are not responsible for maintenance and repairs on equipment, you should know about maintenance schedules and requirements.
OSHA requires that all aerial lifts have certain safety features. The lift must have skid-resistant stepping, standing, and working surfaces. The access way for entering and exiting the aerial lift, including any rungs or steps, must have slip-resistant surfaces. The sides or top guardrail of the platform must be between 38 and 45 inches high to prevent the worker from falling out. The lift must be kept clear of debris, garbage, unneeded tools, grease, and any other items that could get in the way of the work, as well as create slip or trip hazards. And aerial lifts must have attachment points for the personal fall protection device for each person who occupies the work platform. Aerial lifts with articulating or extendable booms must have controls both in or near the platform or bucket, and lower down on the vehicle. The upper controls must be inside or beside the platform, so that they are within easy reach of the operator. All controls must be plainly marked as to their function. The lower controls on the vehicle must be designed to be able to override the lift controls in case of an emergency in which the worker in the platform is unable to operate the lift controls. Except for emergencies, however, lower controls should only be operated with permission from the worker in the lift.
In addition to falling, contact with power lines is one of the most dangerous hazards associated with working in aerial lifts. Never operate any part of an aerial lift within the minimum approach distance from a power line unless you are qualified under the OSHA rules for electric power generation, transmission, and distribution. And the parts of the lift operated within the boundary are electrically insulated. Make sure the insulated portions of lifts and booms are not altered or damaged in any way that could reduce insulating value. In addition to the insulated portion of the equipment, other insulating devices should be checked, including insulating blankets, covers, line hose, gloves, sleeve, and so on. Inspect these items for holes, tears, embedded objects, swelling, softening, hardening, stickiness, inelasticity, or any other unusual signs of potential damage. Do you always inspect insulating devices to make sure they are in good condition in case you accidentally get too close to power lines?
It's time to take a little true-false quiz to test your memory about some of the points we've just discussed. Your job is to decide whether each statement on the screen is true or false. Let's begin. The primary hazard of aerial lifts is eye injuries. True or false? The correct answer is false. The primary hazard is falls. The rated load capacity must be displayed on the equipment. True or false? The correct answer is true. Never exceed the rated load capacity of an aerial lift. Interlock devices are used to protect operators from electrocution. True or false? The correct answer is false. Interlock devices prevent tip-overs. Lower controls must be able to override upper controls in or near the lift. True or false? The correct answer is true. This is an emergency feature in case the operator in the lift is incapacitated and can't operate the controls. How did you do? Did you get all the answers right? Now it's time to ask yourself if you understand the information presented so far. Do you understand what we've said about aerial lift hazards, OSHA design and construction requirements, load capacities, maintenance requirements, protections against contact with power lines? All of this safety information is important because it helps you understand the protections built into aerial lift equipment and OSHA requirements for the equipment. Let's continue now to the next slide and talk about training and authorization requirements. Only trained and authorized employees may operate equipment with aerial lifts. Operators must read and understand the manufacturer's manual for the specific equipment to be operated. Operators must pay particular attention to operating instructions and safety rules. In addition to reviewing the operating manual, operator trainees should receive hands-on training from a qualified person who has experience using the specific equipment to be operated and can judge the trainee's proficiency using the equipment. Operators must be trained to inspect the equipment and work area before each use. They must know what to look for and what to do if they discover something that is not safe. Operators must also demonstrate that they can proficiently and safely operate the equipment, including following all safe work practices and safety rules. Think about the training and proficiency requirements for aerial lift operators. Remember, you may only operate this equipment if you are trained and authorized.
Because a common hazard associated with aerial lifts is falls, operators must wear a personal fall arrest or travel restraint system. Make sure you are wearing a full-body harness before entering the lift. Attach the lanyard to the boom or the platform bucket. Be sure to inspect both harness and lanyard before each use, and make sure you wear the harness and attach the lanyard properly. Never attach to an adjacent pole, structure, or equipment. You could move the lift and forget to untie, which would leave you hanging from the adjacent pole, structure, or equipment as you are pulled out of the lift. Body belts are not allowed as part of a personal fall arrest system. However, a body belt is allowed as part of a travel restraint system. The lanyard must be short enough to prevent a worker from climbing out of the platform. Do you know our fall protection requirements for aerial lifts? Aerial lift equipment must be inspected before each work shift. Look for such defects as cracked welds, hydraulic leaks, damaged control cables, loose wire connections, and tire damage. Also check electrically insulated items and make sure they are all there and in good condition. Perform a control check to make sure operating controls are all functioning correctly, and perform an operating test on the lift itself. And finally, potentially unsafe items discovered through inspection must be carefully examined, and a determination must be made by a qualified service person as to whether the problem constitutes a safety hazard. All unsafe items and conditions must be corrected before the aerial lift can be used. Think about the inspection procedure you need to perform before using an aerial lift.
After inspecting the equipment, you must inspect the immediate work area for hazards that could result in an accident, such as a fall, tip over, or electrocution. Check for any recent earth fills that may not have been properly compacted. If a tire or stabilizer is placed on the soft earth, the equipment may tip over when the boom is lifted or extended. Keep a safe distance from ditches, drop-offs, or holes to avoid accidentally driving into one, which could cause a tip-over. If you use equipment too close to these areas, the side of a hole or ditch could give way under the weight of a tire or stabilizer. Watch for bumps and other floor obstructions. Be careful not to drive over these obstructions because they can impact stability. Look out for debris and other things such as grease or water that could result in loss of stability. Finally, be especially careful of overhead obstructions and high-voltage conductors. Look for them and remember where they are. If there are any overhead obstructions, consider having a spotter on the ground who watches as the operator moves the aerial lift. And be sure the spotter has an effective way to communicate with the operator. Once inspections are conducted, you need to make sure the vehicle is properly set up. Set the brakes so that the vehicle will not move while the lift is elevated. Place wheel chocks under the tires. Position the outriggers or stabilizers on a solid surface. Never move the truck when the boom is elevated with a worker in the platform. Although some equipment is designed to be moved while a worker is in the platform, never move the equipment unless the lift has been lowered and the boom has been retracted. Set up work zone warnings, such as cones and signs, when needed to warn others. Think about the safety precautions you must take when setting up the vehicle before using the aerial lift.
Now, here's a quick review of safety practices we've already discussed. Before using an area lift, make sure you have performed required inspection. Put on a personal fall arrest or travel restraint system and attach the lanyard correctly. Taken care not to overload the lift. Stage the vehicle on a solid surface. And designated a spotter to watch and warn you of hazards in situations where your view is obstructed or there are other distractions like excess noise. When working in the platform, it's very important to always stand firmly on the floor. Don't get on your tiptoes or lean over the railing. Keep the soles of your feet flat while you are in the lift. Don't sit or climb on the edge of the platform. Again, keep your feet firmly planted on the floor. Never use a ladder in the platform to gain more height. Also, never use a plank to bridge a gap between the lift and another structure or work surface. And of course, keep your fall arrest system lanyard attached to the platform or boom at all times. Think about other precautions you need to take to prevent falls while working in an area lift.
After work is completed and before moving the vehicle, make sure the boom is properly cradled. Ensure that the outriggers or stabilizers are returned and stowed in position. Remove wheel chocks and ensure that the path of travel is firm, level, and free of obstructions, both on the ground and in the air. Of course, safety is also an issue when driving a vehicle equipped with an aerial lift. Always look in the direction of travel and keep a clear view of the path of travel. Watch out for pedestrians. Maintain a safe distance from any ground obstacles such as debris, holes, depressions, ramp edges, and other hazards. Also, maintain a safe distance from any overhead obstructions. And limit travel speed according to conditions. That means considering ground surface, ground slope, other traffic in the area, location of personnel, and so on. Do you always drive vehicles equipped with aerial lifts safely and follow the rules reviewed in this slide?
Here are some safe work practices that all area lift operators and other employees working with them should observe. We've touched on some of these already, but a little review never hurts. Check for overhead power lines and high voltage conductors. Keep the platform and boom 10 feet or more from power lines at all times, unless all parts of the lift within the boundary are electrically insulated and you are specifically qualified under the electrical utility rules. Report any defects or equipment malfunctions immediately, and do not use the equipment until necessary repairs have been made by qualified maintenance personnel. Never alter or disable a safety device or interlock device, and be sure to check safety and interlock devices daily to ensure they are functioning properly. Prevent ropes, electric cords, and hoses from entangling with the lift when the platform is elevated, lowered, or moved. Before lowering the lift, make sure the area under the lift is clear of tools, debris, or personnel working on the ground. And of course, never engage in any stunt driving or horseplay when working in or around area lifts. Workers on the ground who work near equipment with area lifts are also exposed to a number of hazards and must take proper precautions. Ground workers also play an important role in helping to keep the employee in the area lift safe. If you are working on the ground, warn operators of area lifts when they are too close to power lines. Both the boom and platform must be kept a minimum of 10 feet from power lines. Don't touch the truck or base of the area lift if the lift is close to power lines. Remember, electricity wants to go toward the ground. If you touch the truck while standing on the ground, the current can go through you to the ground. Watch out for falling objects such as tools and materials. Always wear a hard hat to protect your head when working on the ground near an area lift, and never stand directly under the lift. Also, watch out for the boom and lift when the lift is lowered to make sure it doesn't come down on you. The operator will be looking out for personnel on the ground, but might miss someone because of a blind spot. Finally, make sure you know emergency response procedures in case the worker in the lift is injured or can't operate the controls.
Here's a quick multiple-choice quiz to test your knowledge of the safe work practices we've just reviewed. Fall protection for lift operators is A. Optional, or B. Required. Fall protection for lift operators is B. Required. Aerial lifts must be inspected A. Weekly, or B. Before each shift. The correct answer is B. Before each shift. Before moving a vehicle, the boom must be A. Extended, or B. Cradled. The correct answer is B. Cradled. Otherwise, the vehicle could tip over. Workers on the ground near aerial lifts must wear A. Hard hats, or B. Gloves. The correct answer is A. Hard hats, to protect their heads from falling objects. How did you do? Did you get all the answers right? Let's take a moment now to review. Do you understand fall protection requirements, inspection procedures, vehicle setup rules, safe work practices for employees in the lift and on the ground, safe driving rules for vehicles equipped with aerial lifts? This safety information can help prevent accidents and injuries when working in or near aerial. Now, let's conclude the session with some key points to remember.
Here are the main points to remember from this session on aerial lift safety. Aerial lifts are useful but can also be hazardous. Only operate an aerial lift if trained and authorized. Inspect equipment and the work area before each use. Understand and follow safe work practices, including wearing fall protection. And be especially careful when working around power lines. This concludes the aerial lift safety training session.